I'm going to introduce our speaker for this morning, Anna Reh-Gingerich. Anna is the Watershed Coordinator for the City of Wilmington, and she manages the city's Heal Our Waterways program for Bradley Creek and for Hewlett's Creek. She received her MS in Coastal and Ocean Policy in 2016 from UNC Wilmington, and then she moved to Richmond, Virginia, and worked for the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality in a water quality policy role for several years. But the pull of the ocean and her love of Wilmington brought her back here, and now she works in her current position where she promotes simple solutions for stormwater pollution within our community, and so that's what she'll be talking with us today about. Thank you, Anna.
Awesome. Thanks, Marissa, and thank you all so much for coming out this morning. It's a beautiful day, and so I appreciate you spending it with me for the next hour or so. Like she said, I am the Watershed Coordinator for the City of Wilmington, and if you don't know what a watershed is, we'll get into it in just a little bit. But my primary role is implementing the Heal Our Waterways program, which is based on a watershed restoration plan that we have in place for Bradley Creek and Hewlett's Creek. But don't fear, the things I'm going to talk about today can apply everywhere because it rains everywhere. So through this presentation, I'm going to start off with a brief overview of why stormwater runoff is something that we should pay attention to, and then get into what stormwater solutions are and how they work, some tips to keep them in tip-top shape so they continue to work the way that we intended them to. And then most of all, I hope that you all come away with this today with either a new idea or, a realization that there's a very wide variety in the types of stormwater solutions that are out there, and I hope that at least one of them will work for your specific situation. So, does anyone know what a watershed is? Be willing to put themselves on the spot this morning?
The area of land that goes into a particular body of water, that the precipitation thereon goes into a particular body of water.
Perfect answer. You get extra pancakes this morning. So he was exactly right. Watershed is an area of land that when it rains on that area of land, it will drain to one particular water body. So we typically name that water body, or we typically name that watershed off of that water body. So you can see in the New Hanover County area that we have a lot of watersheds. We have lots of waterways and water bodies. So this map is color-coded, so the yellow and orange watersheds that you see on the left side will eventually drain to the Cape Fear River, and then the green watersheds on the right side will eventually drain towards the Intracoastal Waterway. Both ways, they'll eventually end up in the Atlantic Ocean. So those green watersheds, those are our tidal creeks. Tidal meaning they experience high tides and low tides. That's where you'll also see a lot of our oyster beds and primary nursery areas for really awesome fish species. And my work, here we go. My work takes place mainly in this area right here in Bradley Creek and Hewlett's Creek. Now,
Question.
Yeah.
We live on Bernard's Creek.
Okay.
It's, definitely tidal. I mean, we got less backyard part of the day and more backyard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our area is pretty unique in that we experience tides pretty much everywhere. But the green watersheds, they tend to have more salt water in them, so that's where we see like those oyster beds, and they're a little more estuarine than you may see, if you go farther north up the Cape Fear River. So down here, you get a lot of influence from the Atlantic Ocean, so it'll be pretty marshy down here too. So we use an example of Independence Mall. It's where this red star is right here. Now, Independence Mall, if you were to look at it, would you say that that is a waterfront property? Probably not, right? So I'm here to tell you that everywhere is a waterfront property because we're all connected by the way that water flows around us. So Independence Mall, even though it's way up here, it's still within that greater Hewlett's Creek watershed area and will eventually drain to Hewlett's Creek and then the Intracoastal Waterway and Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so good news, you all have waterfront property, so hopefully that helps your property values a little bit. But that's kind of how we're all connected by the way that water flows over land. Now we're also connected by the way that water flows beneath our feet. So we have 3 separate water systems in the city. The first is the drinking water treatment system, where water is taken upstream from the Cape Fear River, where there's no saltwater intrusion, sent to a drinking water treatment plant to then be piped into our homes for us to use. When we're done with that water, it goes back down to the wastewater treatment plant. My office is actually very close to one, so I smell it when it's working with all those biological and chemical processes to clean it and put it back into the Cape Fear River. But the system that we're going to be talking about today is the stormwater runoff drainage system. And this system is designed to move runoff from streets and properties as quickly as possible to our local waterways. So what do you notice is missing from this system that's in the other 2 systems? Right, treatment, exactly. So stormwater runoff does not get treated before it empties into our local waterways. And when I'm talking about the drainage system, I'm talking about things like storm drains, storm ditches, wet ponds, anything that moves that stormwater runoff. So what is stormwater runoff? Well, when it rains, there are a couple things that can happen. It can evaporate, it can soak into the ground, or it can literally run off of a hard surface. So if I were to pour water on this table, it would literally run off of that surface. So it really lives up to its name. But as it runs over those hard surfaces, what we call impervious surfaces, it can potentially pick up anything in its path. So that includes litter, that includes bacteria, that includes things like motor oil. You know, anything that is in the environment has the potential to end up in our waterways. So examples of impervious surfaces are, surfaces that you typically think of that water can't soak into. So parking lots, rooftops, sidewalks, driveways, patio areas, pool areas, big roadways. All of those count as impervious surfaces because water cannot soak into them. And, our area is really beautiful, and a lot of people like to live here and move here. So over the years, you can see there's been a bit of a change within the way that our watersheds look. So we have more impervious surfaces popping up for homes, places for people to work, people to go to school, roads to get you from point A to point B. So as we have more of these impervious surfaces, we have more stormwater runoff being generated that needs to be managed. So why does that matter? I don't know about you, but I don't think anybody wants to wake up to this site in the morning when they're already running late for work. Flooding is a very visible problem. It's a very immediate problem. It can cause hazardous conditions on roadways, so it's important to manage stormwater runoff to keep this from happening. But the other less visible, I know I say less visible, but you can see it clearly in this picture, problem is pollution. So litter is a very visible pollutant that can end up in our waterways, but there are a lot of pollutants that aren't, but they are still there. And my work really focuses on bacteria. So in those salt marsh areas, almost all of our oyster beds are currently closed to shellfishing because the bacteria levels are too high for safe shellfishing standards. So there's a study that was done by UNCW, and they looked at the relationship between levels of bacteria in a waterway and the amount of impervious surface coverage within that same watershed. So remember the greater drainage area. Now, there can be many reasons for this result, but one relationship that we can kind of visibly see is that the greater impervious surface coverage you have, the more bacteria you're likely to see within that receiving waterway, partly because we have more stormwater runoff being generated that can wash pollutants into those waterways. So the two that I work in are Hewlett's Creek and Bradley Creek, and you can see that, they have pretty high impervious surface coverage and pretty high bacteria levels. And that's because everything goes somewhere when it comes to pollution. It's not out of sight, out of mind. It still exists in the environment. So for pollutants that are pretty visible, like litter, that's something that we can physically go in and remove. It's better to prevent it in the first place, but it's something that, we can see great folks like yourselves and groups like Cape Fear River Watch put on cleanups to help, remove that litter from waterways, which is awesome. But for pollutants that aren't as visible, like bacteria, or as easy to remove from the water, we have to be a little more creative. So that's where Stormwater Solutions come into play. So Stormwater Solutions, you may have also heard them referred to as best management practices, or BMPs. Stormwater control measures, or SEMs, is the going term right now. Engineers can't seem to make their minds up. So I stick with Stormwater Solutions because that's something that will continue because it's exactly what they do. So you can see we have a pretty wide variety up here, and all of these practices, the idea is to go after the vehicle that's transporting that pollution to the waterways. So for bacteria, when I'm working with residents and trying to promote practices to improve bacteria levels, one is picking up after pets, because pet waste can be a really major contributor of bacteria, but the other is we can put in structural practices that actually slow down and soak in that stormwater runoff to keep it from washing the bacteria to our waterways in the first place. So you can see we can go from something that's really easy that we can do in a weekend, an hour or so for less than $20. In some cases to projects that are a little more complex that might be better for commercial spaces or urbanized areas that cost more money and involve more construction work. But that's something that works really well for their space. So these are all solutions, and hopefully we'll be able to find one that works for you. So I kind of already gave this away, but the idea behind Stormwater Solutions is that there are 3 overall steps to them. So the first is to slow down that stormwater runoff so that we can then take it and spread it out over a larger surface of land where it can interact with the vegetation to help filter out some of those pollutants, but ideally to make it easier to soak it in. We're really going after infiltration as much as possible. That's one of the main goals within that watershed restoration plan that I manage, is to help soak in as much stormwater runoff as we can to prevent it from washing pollutants into the waterways. So let's explore what this can look like. The best place to start is with your downspouts. Okay, downspouts are, you're already kind of funneling your stormwater and your runoff from your roof into one location. It's easy for you to redirect. So we're going to talk about downspout redirection. So routing your downspout, seems like a really small change, but it can actually make a really big difference. Okay, you can have quite a bit of runoff coming off of your roof in a typical storm event. And what we really are focusing on is the first 1.5 inches of rain. So that first 1.5 inches of rain, as it flows over those impervious surfaces, that's when most of the pollution is going to be picked up. So that's where the most concentrated portion of stormwater is. It's a little difficult to explain, but if you think about, like, if I had food coloring, if I was starting to drop water on top of it, the first bit of water would be the most colorful, and then after a while it would start to thin out. So that's what we call the first flush. And if you reroute your downspout, and you have space for that water to flow over and for what we call passive infiltration, so that that first inch and a half can kind of interact with vegetation, remove some of those pollutants and soak some of that in, that can make a big difference. So I'm going to let John Evans show you how.
When rainwater runs down your driveway, it picks up pollutants like motor oil, fertilizer, and pet waste, and carries them straight to our local waterways, causing shellfish closures and swimming advisories. Simply directing your downspout onto your lawn or landscape keeps those pollutants out of our waterways and waters your grass. For more helpful hints and to count your actions toward our clean water goal, visit healourwaterways.org.
All right, so that is a flexispout. That's usually what you called a stormwater planter box. This is really nice if you want to have a little planter box. And the idea is that the stormwater, it will start to fill up with runoff from your roof. And the plants up here will, help to filter it and, soak in, and it's just, passively watering your plants for you. But the important part is to make sure you have an overflow, because we don't want your plants to float away if it, gets really, really rainy one day. So don't want all that hard work to just go away. So also with your downspouts, we can do something called a rain barrel or cistern, which is a really big rain barrel. So a rain barrel, the same idea is you want to slow down that stormwater cars with rainwater. They can wash their surfboards, basically any non-potable use. So I wouldn't water a vegetable garden with rainwater from your roof, but just a regular garden, pollinator garden, your lawn. Some folks will even do passive release with their rain barrels, so you can put a bunch of rocks down like right underneath where your spigot is right here. Open it slightly and just allow that water to fall on those rocks, and it will just kind of spread out without you even having to do anything. And again, I will let John Evans tell you how.
3 easy steps. Just cut your downspout to size. Attach a downspout extender and place the rain barrel underneath. If you've installed a rain barrel, log on to healourwaterways.org/take-action to let us know.
And you may have noticed the example rain barrel around the corner out here if you wanted to see how it's set up. So thanks Cape Fear River Watch for showing that off. But I'm going to add just a couple of tips to those 3 steps. The first is raise your rain barrel if you want better water pressure. Use gravity in your favor rather than working against you. You'll also want to have a overflow hose. So let's see. So up here you can see there's a connection where it's connected to another rain barrel, but you could also just take this and redirect it into your yard somewhere, or where the runoff is going to continue to flow. Obviously the more rain barrels that you have, the more water you'll have, so if you have a use for that water, that's awesome, go for it. But that overflow hose is really important because the rain barrels, if they're attached to a downspout, are going to fill up really quickly. So instead of having the water come flying out at the top, it's good to have a place for that to continue on. And the biggest point is please use the water either through that passive, you could use a soaker hose so that you don't even have to think about it. But the more you use that water, the more space you leave for the next rainstorm. So, keep an eye on the weather when you have it. If you see it's going to rain in a couple days, that might be a great time to go out and make sure that it's empty for the next time. And you can also be really creative with these as well. I don't have the artistic ability to do this, but you can also make that a really beautiful, highlight along your house somewhere. Now, if you are interested in a rain barrel, we do have a monthly rain barrel sale. New Hanover Soil and Water Conservation District hosts it. The city helps to sponsor it. But in an ideal situation, it happens on the second Thursday of every month. They're a hot commodity, so they've been selling out pretty quickly. So it's good to check their channels on social media and at the Soil and Water website, which is right here, to make sure that the sale is still going on. But yes.
Soil and Water is adding a second rain barrel sale every month. It's
Oh, okay.
in the evening for people who want to pick it up after work. I'm not sure what the day is, but there will be a second sale.
Okay, perfect. Well, good news for that. So you'll have a couple more opportunities to pick it up. But this is the barrel that's being sold. It's a 50-gallon rain barrel. They sell them for $85. And it comes with all of the connections. So it comes with a spigot at the bottom. It comes with your overflow points at the top. It comes with a filter screen so that you can easily clear off any debris that might get up there. So, yep, this is the website, and then I'll try to share that information when we find out what the other sale date is. All right, so maybe you don't have gutters on your house. Never fear, there are still solutions for you out there. And one of them can be a rain garden. While a rain garden is easier to connect to a downspout, ideally it's a place where you're going to intercept runoff coming from one of those impervious surfaces. So you could put it next to a patio like they have over here. You could put it near a slanted driveway. You could put it, if your property slopes down towards the road, you could put it there. This is great if you're looking to add another garden to your yard. And you can see they come in all kinds of configurations. You can plant them as full as you want. They're really beautiful, and they're a nice addition to your landscape. But the idea is that we're still trying to soak in stormwater runoff. So you can see here that they look like a bowl in the ground. You can especially see that with this one right here. So they're going to be a depressed area in your yard where the runoff can flow into, and it will actually collect. And then the idea is that over a period of time, it will infiltrate into the soil. So that's usually within 24 to 48 hours. And again, we're looking to capture that first 1.5 inches of rainfall because that's where most of that pollution is concentrated. We're trying to capture that first flush. So, for sizing purposes, this is typically, these gardens are typically what that looks like to give you an idea for 1.5 inches of rain. Now, you can, of course, make it as big as you want to if you want to capture even more rain from your roof or, your driveway. But the idea is you still need a source of stormwater. So the best thing to do is go out and look at what's going on in your yard when it's raining. So, get your raincoats ready. But you'll have roof, or in this example it's roof runoff, but just runoff flowing into your garden, and it will pond for a period of time. This is normal. It's supposed to look very wet for a period of time. But then from there, it will soak into the ground. Okay, and we want to see that happen within 24 to 48 hours. Now, if it's going to rain more than 1.5 inches, which it does around here, it rains a lot, although it's been uncharacteristically dry recently. But in a normal year, we do get quite a bit of rain, so you're going to want an overflow or a place for that water to escape if there's more than 1.5 inches. So if it were to rain 3 inches, you're capturing that first 1.5 inches and soaking it in actively, but that water that continues to come in has a place to overflow. Now, a rain garden is not going to work everywhere, okay? You have to have good drainage for a rain garden to work. So there are a couple things you need to do when you're trying to decide on a location. So great, okay, I want to put it next to my patio. I have the perfect spot for it. Now I need to check the drainage. So what you're going to do is you're going to do what we call a percolation test. And that's when you dig a hole that's about 2 feet deep and 1 foot wide, and you fill it with water. And you're going to want to repeat this process 3 times, all right? So each time you're going to time how long it takes for that water to disappear. If it disappears on the last time within 48 hours, you've got a good spot for a rain garden. Now we have a lot of sandy soils in that area, so it's usually a good spot for a rain garden, but it's always best to check on the front end so that you know what you're getting into. Now I say to do it 3 times because if it's really dry like it has been right now, the water table is going to be lower. So you want to simulate what it's going to do on like a normal year, or if it's been raining a lot, if it's still going to drain in that situation, if the soils are wet underneath it. You're also going to want to keep it away from your foundation because you are actively infiltrating water into the ground. You don't want any issues to pop up around your foundation with cracking or anything like that. So this is what that process looks like when we connect a downspout to a rain garden. So they've rerouted their downspout and it comes underground and it's headed towards this rain garden. You can see they have really sandy soil, so it's going to drain really quickly. And you can really see that bowl shape in this picture here. Okay, that's how we make sure that the water actually will stay in that garden rather than just flowing over or, just flowing all over your yard. We want it to collect in an area where it will infiltrate. And then you plant it full of plants. You can mulch it if you want to. And then this is what it looks like when you have water in it. So here is that overflow. I wanted to point that out. That's why I love this picture. You can put down some river rock right there. Essentially, you want it to be lower than the rest of your rain garden. So you can see they kind of put mulch all the way around, so they have something called a berm. And then this section is a little bit lower than everything else, so the water will flow in and then flow out this way when it gets really heavy. But you can see it looks just like a regular garden, which means that it needs the same maintenance as a regular garden. So I know it seems counterintuitive, you need to water a rain garden, but for the first 2 growing seasons at least, you really need to help those plants get established. If it has rained a lot, you probably don't need to water so much, but if we're in a drought period, you'll want to keep an eye on them to make sure that they're not getting too wilty. And you get bonus points if you use a rain barrel to water your plants with. So, we do also recommend planting your rain gardens with native plants because native plants are usually more drought tolerant, and you are going to specifically want to look for drought tolerant plants because your rain garden is draining within 48 hours. It's going to be dry more frequently than it is wet. So we found over the years that we plant plants that really like wet spaces, but then they don't do so well because our rain gardens get dry so quickly. So just another tip to help it become really full. Now, mulch in a rain garden, there's kind of some debate about this right now. You can use mulch if that's what you want it to look like, if you want it to look like a purposeful garden bed. You also don't have to use mulch. You can fill it with plants. You can fill it with grasses. Some folks even just have it as like lawn. So you still have that depressed area, so the water will still go in there, but all you have to do is mow it, okay? It really just depends how you want it to look like and how much maintenance you want to do. If you do mulch, we recommend triple shredded hardwood mulch because it won't float away the first time it rains. But if, I've seen some that have pine straw in them too. They do all right. The pine straw does float away sometimes, but if that's what you have, use what you have access to, absolutely. Just please don't use dyed mulch. We're trying to keep pollution out of the environment with this, and that kind of defeats the purpose if you put dyed mulch in there. So with mulch, some maintenance tips are you are going to want to refresh it occasionally. If it's getting so that it doesn't drain so well, you can go in with a little pitchfork and kind of break that mulch up in the bottom area here especially, just to help, to help encourage infiltration, because that's what we're really going for. Now, erosion is something that's a little more specific to rain gardens from regular gardens. Where the water is flowing in, whether you have it flowing in from the side, like here, or if you have it coming from a downspout that you've connected to your rain garden, you know, it comes in quickly, so it might erode a little bit in that area. So to prevent this from happening and messing with the integrity of your rain garden, you can put down some rocks, like large river rocks. Just please be careful with your lawnmowers because they will eat those up. You can also plant more plants. So we went back and we planted a lot of plants in this area here to help hold those soils in place. And again, rain gardens need good drainage. I know it says up to 72 hours here. I really prefer closer to 24 or 48 hours because you're kind of pushing it closer to a wetland when you hit 72 hours. If it's not draining well, you know, you can use those tips of raking the bottom, breaking up your mulch. But if, you know, over time nothing that you're doing is working, it might be that that was really a better spot for a wetland. So that's what we're trying to prevent in the beginning when we do that percolation test. But never fear, because a backyard wetland is also a great stormwater solution. So the difference between a backyard wetland and a rain garden is that a wetland is going to stay wet. This is perfect for that soggy patch of yard that you just don't know what to do with. It won't go away. It's always wet. And the idea is the same. You can see that it's also bowl shaped, so the runoff will go into that area. But the plants that you pick are going to be more tolerant of having wet feet, so they can stay wet for a longer period of time. I know the minute people see standing water, the immediate thought is mosquitoes. Like, I do not want to do that. I hear you. Okay, mosquitoes, they cause a lot of problems. However, when we are planting our wetlands, we specifically want to pick plants that encourage natural mosquito predators. So mosquitoes, you know, there's a period of time where they have an incubation period in the water. So if you're actively attracting wildlife that eats those larvae, you won't have mosquitoes. So that's why, again, we encourage those native plants, because then you're really creating your own little ecosystem in your backyard. And these plants are great because they help to filter the water that's in there, so you're helping to filter out some of that pollution. They help to soak some of that in. It's not going to infiltrate as much as a rain garden, but we're still doing that slowing down and spreading out action to help treat some of that pollution. If you want to see a stormwater wetland in action, Wade Park is a constructed stormwater wetland. It's the second largest one in North Carolina, is what I heard the other week. But it's, you know, it's great. It manages about 12% of the entire Hewlett's Creek drainage area, so it's a lot of acres going into that wetland. And it does come out cleaner on the other side. They've been looking into that, so it does a great job. All right, so maybe, you know, you really don't have gutters and you don't have a lot of yard that you want to sacrifice. You could do something called a vegetated swale. It's a similar idea to a rain garden, just shaped a little differently, and you can put it in different locations. So a great spot is, you know, along the edge of your property. Another great spot is if you don't have gutters. This is probably a familiar sight. You're going to have that erosion right where the gutters, all that sheet flow is coming off right into that area. You could turn this into a swale or even a dry creek bed. You know, you can put rocks right here to help stabilize. You can excavate it a little bit more to look like this and plant it full of plants, so that then you don't have all of this erosion happening, and potentially also, you know, washing sediment down to the storm drain as well. And it also looks nicer, in my opinion. So that's another option. If you don't have the ability to put in, you know, big structural practice, that is also okay, because native landscaping is another great stormwater solution. So native plants are awesome because they don't really need fertilizers or pesticides, so we can prevent things like this. So Greenfield Lake, has had many examples of algal blooms, and that's usually from too much fertilizer in the environment being washed into those waterways, and then you get really hot weather, and it's just a perfect storm for for an algal bloom to occur. Now, algal blooms can cause a lot of problems. You can end up with fish kills down the line. They can also potentially be toxic themselves, as we've seen in the news in the past. So, reducing our reliance on those commercial fertilizers and pesticides is a great way to prevent this from happening. So we have lots of native plants for the southeast coastal plain. That's what you want to look for when you're looking up native plants. These are a couple of my favorites. This is a great time of year for muhly grass and beautyberry. There's actually examples of them right outside. But we have so many beautiful ones. It's sometimes hard to choose. So to help you with that, you can go build a list of native plant resources that I've just been finding all over from different partner agencies. I've created a couple of lists myself of native plants that work well for rain gardens. So you're more than welcome. That's in the learning library at my website. I continue to add to it. So I recently found a couple resources that listed some native plant vendors in the area. So feel free to check it out. This website, the North Carolina Extension Gardener Toolbox, I use this almost every day. Okay, this website is awesome because you can go in, they have a huge database of plants. You can specify it to what area of North Carolina you're in. So you can go coastal, I want native plants, and I want them to flower in fall. Okay, that's how specific you can get with it. You can learn about all kinds of native plants, and the more that you request plant vendors to have native plants, the more likely we'll see native plants at nurseries in the area because they want to see that demand. They want to know that they'll be sold. So this is a great learning tool to have in your toolbox.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You're involved with the plants that come in from the intercoastal, or the creeks that come in from the intercoastal.
Yes.
What bank plants are most saltwater tolerant for that area?
That is a great question that I would use that toolbox to look up. So you can also specify, salt tolerant on there. We've frequently used like juncus, which is a native marsh grass along those areas as well. But you can find all kinds of resources on there.
Yeah, we're in an area where the bigger the port gets, the bigger the ships get, the more saltwater incursion we get.
Sure. Yeah, in Barnard's Creek for sure. Yep. All right, so we can't talk about native plants without also talking about trees. Trees are a great stormwater solution, and that's because they help intercept stormwater runoff in multiple ways. The engineers will always talk about tree canopy, and I'm always like, you have to look at the whole tree too. But tree canopy, if you think about when it's raining, you can take shelter under a tree. Why?
Leaves.
Yeah, exactly. So those leaves help to catch those raindrops as they're coming down, which will then evapotranspirate later on. So it helps to prevent runoff from even happening, underneath the tree. But then you also have great root systems. Trees have all these lovely root systems that really help to hold the soil in place and also help soak in that stormwater runoff. So they encourage infiltration. And they also have a lot of other great benefits, which I don't think I need to convince you all, how great trees are. But just add on to your list that they are also great for stormwater. All right, so maybe you're also interested in pervious materials. So remember, impervious means water cannot soak in. Pervious means water can. So we can make adjustments to how much impervious surface we put on by replacing some of those with permeable materials. So things like pervious pavers, pervious concrete. They can be costly. So I also like to talk about reducing your impervious footprint completely. So I love this picture because this is a great idea for a driveway. You only need to put impervious surface where your tires are going to go, and then you have all of this grassy green space underneath where that stormwater runoff can help soak in. Because remember, the more impervious surfaces we have, the more stormwater runoff is going to be generated. If you are putting in a walking path or maybe a path in your backyard, use stepping stones. Have space between what you're putting in so that you have more of those green spaces to help soak in runoff. But if you need hard spaces, that's totally understandable. Sometimes they're required. But you can consider things like permeable pavers. They have spaces in between them so that the water can soak into them. You can set up your bricks that way too. One maintenance concern is that grass will try to come up to them, so you need to stay on top of that. But this is a great option for patios or front sidewalks, things like that. These aren't so great for parking lots because they get so much sediment in them. We typically use things like Pervious concrete because it's a little more sturdy. They're also making pavers that are even stronger and have really fun puzzle pieces that you put together to reduce those gaps for sediment and make it easier for maintenance as well. So there are a lot of options out there, but I really like the incorporating more green space, reducing that footprint because that's a cheaper option and it's really easy, a little bit easier to do. And then the last stormwater solution I want to talk about today is pollution prevention. Keeping the pollution out of the environment in the first place is also a really great action for improving water quality. So, the kind of big list of pollutants that we see: litter, yard debris, motor oil, fertilizers, pesticides, pet waste, sediment. Those are all some of our more prevalent pollutants. So the more that we can do to prevent scenes like this from happening, the less likely that runoff is going to be able to transport those pollutants to the creeks. So there are great actions that you can take using alternatives to commercial fertilizers and pesticides, using things that are more organic. If you see a storm drain that's clogged like this, you can call us for a work order, but also, any yard waste that you have on your property, if you've been, cutting back a lot of things or mowing, you can leave those leaves and grass clippings on your yard for natural fertilizer and also habitat for a lot of critters. But if you need to, like you have big branches or something like that, you can bag it or put it in a container, a marked container, and put it out with your regular trash pickup. If you live within city limits, they'll pick it up on that same day. Please, please, please do not blow any grass clippings or any other yard debris into storm drains. That can, one, cause clogs in the infrastructure, really costly for us to clean up, cause those big flooding problems that you saw earlier in the presentation. But also, this is all natural fertilizer, so that's more fertilizer that's ending up in our waterways that can contribute to algal blooms. Let's see. Some more great tips: recycling as much as possible. If you wash your cars, you can wash your car on the grass, adding to that green space. If you wash your car on that grass, that allows that water to soak into your yard, and also the plants help to filter out any of the soaps or any other grime that might be coming off of your car. So to go with the not putting anything down a storm drain, this is our stormwater pollution hotline. So if you see anyone putting anything other than rain in a storm drain, you can call this number. We also have an online form. Pictures are very helpful. It's helpful to know time, where it happened, and it can be as anonymous as you like so that people don't come after you. But it goes to our compliance officers who will follow up on that situation. So please, 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 if you see something, say something. And then also getting involved with, organizations like Cape Fear River Watch that do a lot of great cleanups is a great way there's another great stormwater solution as well. So with my Heal Our Waterways program, if you live in Bradley Creek or Hewlett's Creek, or you know anybody that lives in those watersheds, we work with New Hanover Soil and Water to put in practices like rain gardens, like cisterns, like trees on private property. We pay for it and we install it. You have to go through an application process. We do currently have a wait list, but please still apply. The more interest we have, the more funding we can ask for. If you live outside of those boundaries, you can also reach out to New Hanover Soil and Water to inquire about a couple of their other funding programs that they have. Again, there's the monthly rain barrel sale, and a lot of these projects are also really great for DIY. I like to talk about a whole range of them so that you can have some ideas that you can take back with you. Either having your kids or your grandkids help you with a project, or if you'd like to do something on your own time, there are a lot of great options for that as well. So again, these are those boundaries for my funding program, but do reach out to Soil and Water if you're interested and you live outside of those boundaries. And all of the information that I talked about today is also available at our website, healourwaterways.org. This is where you can go in and you can filter through all of those solutions that we talked about. I have them organized from simple all the way to super complex, well not super, but more complex, would require more labor and funding. But all of that is on there with more examples and resources for you to look at as well. And that is my spiel. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, just a question. So, I have several rain gardens, and I think planting the plants is extremely important because I have a driveway and it tends to wash away any of the mulch.
Yes.
So it's extremely important to have that in. I built a property in Carolina Beach, and around my foundation, I put a French drain all the way around the entire perimeter, so my gutters go directly into the French drain. It never goes to the road.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's great too. Like underground infiltration is also something that you can do, and then it's super easy. You just mow over that area like your regular yard.
And if you have a lake or something, which I have a property with a lake, and they require to be, they call it Lake Smart, is a 25-foot buffer before the lake of native plants. Just basically letting the grass grow and not cutting there. It's pretty important. And it's kind of neat to see what native plants just naturally grow up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess the third thing they do at this lake is to ask people not to fertilize their lawns. If they fertilize their lawns, it goes directly into the lake.
Yeah, exactly. Those are a lot of great points that I just didn't have time to add in here too. But yeah, buffers. If you live on a waterway and you're looking for a place to add more vegetation, the edge of your property is a perfect place to just let that kind of grow wild, because that is a natural filter. A lot of farmers also put that on the edge of their fields now to help filter out sediment or anything else that might be running over that property. So, yes, yep, riparian buffers, more trees along the creeks as well. All of those are really great solutions. Yeah.
I noticed it was on your slide, but you didn't talk about it very much, the dog waste.
Oh, yes.
And especially people who have yards where the dog can go in the back and they don't clean it up because they don't think it's hurting anything.
Right. Yep.
What happens to that?
Yep. Well, pet waste, that's another big part of my job. We have ordinances for public property, so on any parks or other public spaces within the city of Wilmington and town of Wrightsville Beach. It's a $250 fine if you leave pet waste behind and like a police officer were to stop you and you can't produce a pet waste bag. But a big part of it is also educating folks that your private property is really important as well. We can't enforce that, but talking to folks like, hey, remember we all have that waterfront property. The rain doesn't just stop at the edge of my lawn and say, okay, this is the end of Anna's yard. We don't go any farther than this. It will still wash off into creeks and waterways. But yeah, bacteria, pet waste from bacteria is a big contributor. No, bacteria from pet waste is a big contributor as well. Yeah.
I just want to make a comment about washing your car and your lawn. I'm from the desert of the Valley of Southern California, and actually during the summer months, it's illegal to wash your car on the driveway or any roadway.
Oh, really?
It's a huge ticket for it. You have to do it on grass.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
I did not know that. Yeah, that's crazy. So she said she lives in an area where it's really, really dry. You said the Southern California, and it's actually illegal for them to wash their cars on their driveways because they should be doing it on their property so that the water can actually soak in rather than just letting that water run off.
Used biodegradable soap, I imagine.
Yes.
Yes. Two questions. There's a lot of complicated stuff you're talking about here. Is there some way that someone could come out and look at our property and give us some advice as to which of these solutions are best suited?
Sure.
And,
so if you live in city limits, I can help and come out and talk to you. I can't, unfortunately, or you can also reach out to Soil and Water. Unfortunately, if you don't live within those two waterways, I can't offer you any funding options, but we can definitely talk through what might be good for your property. If you live outside of the city limits, there are a lot of landscape professionals that are trained in rain gardens and other stormwater solutions. So I could share that list with Marissa. There's a rain garden certified list of professionals from NC State's website, and you can filter through and look for folks through that as well. The Arboretum is also a great resource. They have some really knowledgeable folks out there too.
Okay. And another question. Is there any sense that any of this stuff will ever be put into the building code? Requiring people to put in, pervious driveways and this kind of thing?
Sure. So there are actually a couple provisions that do require that, especially if they live in those water resource protection areas that are really close to salt marshes and areas that are classified as what we call an SA waterway, so a waterway that's supposed to have shell fishing. They can only install so much impervious surface before they need to start before they're required to start incorporating those types of practices. So the latest land development code incorporated more of that, and we're looking at more opportunities to try to incorporate that throughout the entire city as well, to really try to encourage more folks to do this.
The city does, if you're going to put in so much parking, you have to, a commercial, like I thought Bojangles, I thought, gosh, they're being so environmental. This is wonderful on Carolina Beach Road, and then realized they were forced to put in some pervious parking, and the new Harris Teeter at Independence and Carolina Beach Road has those pavers.
Yep.
And they have to put so many around. But unfortunately, the county doesn't seem to have that same rule. It seems to be the city. And living in Carolina Beach, it breaks my heart that we don't have a rule down there to quit putting in these tremendous parking lots that do not fill up.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that would be that's one thing we could really make a difference in this county.
Voting. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.